Peace and blessings, family. In today's video, there's so many things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about generational healing. I want to talk about love. I want to talk about bringing the unknown into the light so that we can bring a voice to it, so we can shine a light on the parts of ourselves that we may not even recognize are operating. So a big part of my journey, well, what led me onto my journey was a couple years ago. I was in a relationship, and I remember I kept telling him, "You remind me of my dad. I feel like I'm dating my dad." And it was through that realization that I started to see that many people in my family line were actually suffering from the same kinds of patterns and problems and issues. And I was like, wait, there has to be something deeper than this. There has to be a reason why we're all playing out these same storylines. Equally so, at that time, I would also see the examples of happy relationships, thriving relationships, people that were able to build empires together, strong empires, and do it on the foundation of love. And I want to bring that insight and that perspective and that lens into this conversation, because oftentimes when we are navigating suffering, we can take on the lens that life doesn't have goodness for us, or that that's a fairy tale, or that doesn't exist, and it's not true. And so thankfully, that awareness around that pattern that I witnessed playing out in both sides of my family line, it awakened a journey in me, a deeper searching. And that's where the name, my brand, comes from, Seeking the Empress, because I wanted to discover my own throne, my own power, my own empire within myself, my own sovereignty. And so I began the journey of seeking spiritual healing. And many people, when they experience suffering, they turn to understanding spirituality and God and just these deeper concepts that promise peace, that promise harmony, that promise liberation from the things that keep us down. And I'm sharing this with you today because there's just so much that has shifted in my consciousness and my awareness through this process, through this journey. And one of the things is that we can unconsciously be carrying generational trauma. And it's like, how could we even know that that is a thing that is affecting us, right? Because it's stored in our unconscious, it's stored in our cells. And the awareness is that the pain, the suffering, the trauma that our ancestors didn't have the capacity to process, didn't have the tools to liberate their own selves from, didn't have the understanding, didn't have, many of them were just barely trying to survive, trying to get themselves out of these experiences so that they could take care of their families. And so with that being said, I just also want to hold gratitude for all of them that have paved the way for us to have the lives that we have now, because that is equally important. So a few years ago, I ended up in Thailand seeking some liberation from my own suffering, and I met one of my great teachers, Mutsumi, who helped me to navigate a process called memory therapy. And it is exactly connected to what I'm sharing to you now about bringing awareness to the unconscious that is causing us to react and be on defense as opposed to operating from our true nature. And so in that process, at that time, I was suffering in my relationship, and I didn't understand why I was experiencing so much pain until I started to navigate the process. And she brought an awareness that I was carrying this wound from my father, right? So then as we start doing this healing work and we start recognizing that we're playing out patterns from our parents, we could easily go down the path of blaming our parents and getting upset, which I think is an honest part of the healing journey, because I also went through that until I came into the realization that they were simply doing the same, just operating from their own knowing, doing the best that they could from what they had. And so it's these stages of perception that we end up navigating to come back to what I would call truth. And there are paths, right? There are levels of our liberation. You know, first it may be navigating the victim consciousness, the part of ourselves that has been operating as a victim, that this is happening to me. And that is a very real stage of the journey, because we have to be able to shine a light on what's happening to us. And then moving from the victim consciousness to understanding that everything is happening for us and not to us, for us to have a deeper understanding, for us to recognize what has caused us to get to that state in time, right? Again, shining a light. And simply shining a light sometimes can be all that's necessary in order to shift the pattern, in order to free us, in order to bring healing. But sometimes it's much deeper. Sometimes it requires tools, right? So that we can learn to regulate our nervous system, because trauma is a physiological process that happens to us, right? We could think we're all good, but our bodies were experiencing the suffering of that, right? And so I've been doing this work called family constellation therapy, and I want to take some time in this video to bring awareness to that therapy, because it is remarkably incredible what happens in these sessions. And how I came across this therapy is a few years ago. I was watching the show Sex, Love, and Goop on Netflix by Gwyneth Paltrow. And on the 5th episode, they utilized this therapy as a form of getting to the root of the pattern of what was causing issues in the relationship. And so as I watched that episode, it made me go on my own search to find this therapy. And so I did some research, and I came across a gentleman named Jack who facilitates these therapies, these constellations. And in doing research on this therapy, I came across the origin of how this therapy was formed. And so basically, a gentleman, I believe his name is Bert Hellinger, I hope I'm not sabotaging his name, but he was a priest at the time, and he went to live with the Zulu tribe for an extended period of time. And in living with them, he learned their ways of healing issues in their tribe, in their community. And they would do this now named therapy, family constellation therapy, where they would gather together, and the person with the issue would pick someone in the circle to represent their issues. And it's kind of like looking from a 3D perspective of like what's happening, right? And there really is no way for me to explain this that will truly give you the insight on what actually happens, because it's far beyond explanation. However, I'm going to do my best to explain it based on what I experience and what I understand. Okay, so the person with the issue, a group of people come together, right? This group of people doesn't necessarily have to know this person. They could be complete strangers. But somehow, when they come together in this field and with this intention for healing, it creates a space, a vortex, a channel for that which is unseen to be seen. And so let's say I have an issue that I'm suffering with, a pattern, and I go and I pick someone to represent myself. Now, that person will take on the role of my energy, and in this unfolding of this therapy, start to act out and embody the things that represent myself, known and unknown. Now, let's say in that process, we come to realize that a part of the issue has to deal with my father, a part of the pattern, a part of the unresolved trauma that I'm experiencing has to do with my father. Someone else in the circle will now represent that role of my father. And so let's say in that navigation process, we recognize that the pattern and the issue that I'm experiencing with my father goes even deeper and further beyond him, and it goes to his father or his mother. We then choose someone to represent the mother. Even though my grandmother or his mother may be physically deceased at the moment, somehow this field is so intelligent that it allows the person to connect to that person. So it's like a channeling of that person, right? So the grandma now has a representation, and however far back we need to go to bring resolution to whatever this issue is, this ceremony, this circle of healing allows for the transcendence of time and space and dimension in order to bring awareness. And so everyone who is in the circle now becomes a part of this, almost like an acting out. It's almost like a play is happening to show the person that needs the healing a 3D perspective, right? And then somehow everyone that is in the experience, somehow they're all connected too, because they're there playing this role out, but it could be resolving something within them too. Somehow it's like divinely orchestrated. And so I've been doing this therapy for a couple of years now, and it is beyond me what is happening. It is beyond me what is happening. And so a few books that I want to recommend if you are on this journey of coming into ancestral healing or generational healing, or recognizing that there are issues, there are patterns, there are things that you may be playing out in your family line, in your relationships, things that are repeating, that you're like, all right, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to have deeper understanding. First and foremost, family constellation therapy, incredible. Second, if you want to also look at 2 documentaries on Netflix, Sex, Love, and Goop, the 5th episode, although the entire series has great insights. And a few books that I recommend is It Didn't Start With You, and I think it's called Children of Emotionally Unavailable Adults, Parents, something like that. If you Google that, you'll find the name of the book. Adults with Emotionally Unavailable Parents, something like that. All right, and these books talk about understanding what's actually happening, right? In one of the examples in the book, It Didn't Start With You, they were talking about a father who he had murdered someone in his lifetime, right? And everyone in the family knew about it, but no one testified, and he went along with like living his life without ever having to pay for it. Now, this energy of atonement came through. These energies of soul loyalties come through, right? And so when the son was around the age of when this father committed that crime, he found himself in prison for something that he didn't do. And through doing this navigation process and this healing work, came to realize that he was atoning for the energy of his father. It's like, how could you know what I'm saying? Like, how could you understand? How could you get to this realization that these are the kind of things that are affecting your life in this lifetime? Right? These are beyond what we understand, but it also explains the multidimensionality of our experience, the multidimensionality of who we are as divine beings. And so, yeah, there's lots of things that I can go into in this process. You know, there's lots of things that I can explain, lots of things that I'm still processing, but I want to just bring voice to the awareness that sometimes the things that we're suffering from in our life are caused by things that didn't even happen in our lifetime, and we're literally just playing them out until it resolves. And of course, through the process of epigenetics, we get to tell a new story. But I do think that there is a beautiful liberation and healing process in order to get to that liberation that can happen through shedding a light and bringing awareness to these parts of ourselves and our lineage that didn't have the opportunity to be voiced. For example, all of the native people, all of the indigenous people of the land who have been massacred and who have been stripped from their land for what? Greed? For what? The process of evolution that is actually destroying our planet. So I think it's really important to speak about that too, and I know that that's heavily loaded with a lot of pain and suffering that a lot of people don't want to address, but this is what has happened to many of our ancestors. The slavery, the killing, the sacrificing, the rituals, all of the things that happened to these people of the past that just have gotten swept under the rug as an illusion for moving things forward, for evolving, which the native people were connected to the land. They are connected to the land. We are connected to the land. And a part of our healing is healing our relationship to nature and to the natural world, and to recognize that we are a part, we are one with this beautiful unfolding, that we are not above it. So generational healing can occur through doing the work of liberating our wounds, recognizing what are the patterns playing out, the sicknesses that are playing out, the behaviors that are playing out, that we see surrounding us in our family members, that we see playing out in the friends, in the people that show up in our life, because they're all connected. They're all there to show us that mirror. Every single one of them. And I think if there's any kind of remedy that I can leave as we shine a light on this energy, now how can we resolve it? Of course, doing the work, but I do also want to talk about the energy of love, because it truly has the capacity to heal all things. And when we hear love, you know, it's such a surface level consciousness sometimes when we think of it, but really it truly has the power to transmute and traverse all things. And when we really, really, really connect to the love within us, and when we truly practice loving ourselves and loving all beings, there's miracles that occur in that. There's healing, there's transformation, there's liberation. So I'm gonna leave this video at that. I love you, family. And if you feel like you're navigating some of these things, please take a look at some of these modalities, educate yourself, bring awareness to these things, go get therapy. Sometimes traditional therapy may not, but may only take you so far, right? So you can explore holistic therapies, spiritual healing, because these are other avenues for us to go into deeper relationship with self. All right, and follow the things that are calling you. These are not things that I was told about. They were things that presented themselves to me on my journey of self-exploration, seeking my own self, and you know, somehow it led me on this spiritual path. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, that's all that new age stuff and whatever. There have been ancient teachings that have been here far beyond all of these limited self-concepts. And so don't allow those things to cause cognitive dissonance in your process. Okay? Be open. And with that even being said, like, I'm someone who has been navigating this process for quite some time, and you know, yoga has been very helpful for me, dance has been very helpful for me, breath work has been very helpful for me. And in becoming a facilitator of these things, I've had to deal with very deep, restrictive religiosity beliefs that make me fear this path, that make me think what I'm doing is wrong. And that can be that can stop a lot of people from really going into their healing process. And again, just want to shine a light on these things that can happen on your journey. And I love you. Happy healing.